You can have the right face, the right body, the right speech, and still be ignored as if you were transparent. Because in the game of seduction, the problem isn't what you offer. It's the desperate way you deliver it. What you're about to hear now isn't about being cold, cruel, or indifferent. It's about stopping selling your soul for crumbs of attention. Because the brutal truth is this: the more you try to please, the more invisible you become. Women don't fall in love with those who are available. They become addicted to those who disappear on purpose. Contempt, when executed well, isn't rejection. It's silent power. It doesn't destroy, it plants doubt. It's the poison that makes her question if you're still there. And when she misses you, you've already won. This isn't disguised machismo, nor is it scoundrel advice. This is evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and pure behavioral strategy. You won't learn here to ignore out of pride. You'll understand how a true emotional master manipulates scarcity as a lethal weapon of attraction. And before you say this is cruel, let me ask you something blunt. How many times have you been replaced by someone who barely tried? How many times have you given your all and still been replaced by someone who didn't care? Yeah, the reality is simple. Women don't desire men who give themselves up. They desire those who escape. Nietzsche said that what is done for love is always beyond good and evil. But few understand this phrase. He wasn't romanticizing passion. He was talking about power. When you love intensely, you enter a primitive state where moral rules don't apply. You lose your sense of justice. You sacrifice yourself. And in the process, you nullify yourself. What you need now is the opposite. It's not about stopping loving. It's about learning to use love as an emotional strategy to be desired by her, not because you gave yourself up, but because you knew how to withdraw at the peak. This series of chapters isn't for the average man. It's for those who have suffered enough being too good. For those who understand that empathy without hierarchy only breeds humiliation, and that in today's world, being too available is the new emotional failure. Prepare to understand contempt like never before. Not as revenge, but as refinement, as an art, as the only possible way to stop being the clown in the story and become the enigma it can't decipher. Now, take a deep breath, because what comes next isn't easy, and it could change everything about how you relate to the opposite sex. She liked you. The conversation was good. The chemistry seemed to work. You thought you were on the right track. And then, out of nowhere, the interest evaporated. The message viewed without a response. The stories with hints that weren't meant for you anymore. The sudden disappearance disguised as I'm in a rush. And you ask yourself, where did I go wrong? The answer is cruel. And that's why almost no one has the courage to say it. Your mistake was being too easy to decipher. You were predictable, you were available, and above all, you were controllable. And the moment a woman realizes she can predict your next moves, she loses her biological drive to conquer. Because desire doesn't survive where there's no tension. And tension arises from the unknown, from the man she can't immediately classify, who responds when he wants, who shows up on his own time, who doesn't offer certainties but provokes assumptions. The problem isn't being nice, it's being predictably submissive. From an early age, society taught you to please in order to conquer. Be polite, be present, respond quickly, show how you feel. But what she feels isn't a result of what you offer, but of how you regulate it. Imagine a guy who says, "Good morning, princess," every day, responds within seconds, gives in to every invitation, and constantly cancels appointments just to be with her. Now, imagine the opposite. A man who always controls his schedule, responds when he can, not when she wants, and even when interested, never gives her more than she deserves. Which of these two generates more fascination? Which of these two will she tell her friends about as a delicious challenge? You think love is won by emotional intensity, but her brain is driven by intermittent rewards. And that's not me saying it. It's her own dopaminergic system that responds to unpredictable patterns of attention. Psychologist B.F. Skinner proved this with conditioning experiments. Intermittent reinforcement creates addiction. Translation: when you're unpredictable in how you deliver attention and validation, you become more addictive than any consistent man. The problem is, most guys are as predictable as a bad Netflix series, and that's why they get dumped by episode 3. Now, if you think the mistake is just being too quick with your responses, you're wrong. Predictability goes far beyond that. It's in the type of compliment you give, always the same beautiful, hot, wonderful. always in the same tone, with the same frequency, with the same neediness disguised as affection. It's in the same invitations. Shall we go out? Shall we have dinner? Shall we do something? It's in the lack of depth and the tension-free emotional routine. She knows what you're going to say before you even open your mouth, and so she disconnects without guilt. The problem is, at this very point, you still think you're doing well. She still responds even if less enthusiastically. She still laughs, even if out of politeness, and you interpret this as reciprocity. But in her mind, interest is already waning, and she's just waiting for a better distraction to make the final cut. This is the most dangerous stage, when the man thinks everything is fine, and the woman has already started planning her disappearance, all because he didn't understand the game of mystery. He didn't know how to generate doubt. He didn't know how to generate effort. He didn't know how to make himself rare. The truth is that the predictable man breaks the rhythm of seduction. Seduction is a dance, not a race. It requires pause, contraction, and expansion. But this man dances like someone desperate to get to the end of the song, and the result is always the same. She stops dancing. Have you ever seen what happens to a cat when you throw a ball directly at him? Nothing. He ignores it. Now try dragging the ball slowly, paused, pretending it's going to escape. The hunting instinct is activated immediately. Women, like cats, are motivated by the desire to conquer, not by passive surrender. To be unpredictable is to be huntable. To be predictable is to be disposable. This is where the key point of this chapter comes in. You need to become a mystery in motion. Someone she wants to decipher, but never quite manages to. Someone who shows up on their own time, who compliments things no one else sees, who disappears after the hottest moment of the conversation, who doesn't give their all on the first date. This isn't coldness. This is conscious seduction, strategic seduction, and as contradictory as it may seem, you will be more valued by whoever has to fight for your attention. Contempt in this sense isn't arrogance, it's regulation. It's the ability to keep your emotional energy under control, not spill it like a bottomless river. Machiavelli's philosophy teaches us that true power lies in knowing when to act and when to retreat, and in the art of conquest, a well-placed retreat is worth more than 1,000 empty advances. You need to learn to disappear at the right time. Create strategic silences. Leave questions unanswered. Cut the conversation off at its peak. Show that even enchanted, you still choose to maintain your own access. Because true value isn't in how much you give, it's in how much you know how to keep yourself whole. And the moment she realizes she doesn't have complete control over you, the first sign of true desire arises: doubt. And it's with this doubt that you begin to manipulate her perception, not like a shallow player, but like an emotional strategist. And the first step has been taken. Now you understand that the most common mistake is also the most lethal. Being predictable doesn't make you trustworthy, it makes you forgettable. But what if instead of becoming forgettable, you became addictive? What if instead of being ever present, you learned to disappear the right way? That's what we're going to talk about now. You disappear, and she feels a discomfort. It's not anger, it's not longing, it's something more primal. It's curiosity in the form of restlessness. She opens WhatsApp, sees you haven't responded, refreshes her stories to see if you've appeared elsewhere. She tries to occupy her mind, but something pulls. She doesn't miss you because she loves you. She misses you because you're not where you should be on a leash. This is the power of silence, but not just any silence. It's the silence that comes from someone who has already made enough of an emotional impact to be noticed by their absence. This kind of silence doesn't ignore, it plants doubt. It doesn't push away, it attracts. Because silence only transforms into desire when it comes after enchantment, and that's where most men fail. They either disappear before leaving a mark, or they remain present until they become part of the furniture. The human mind is conditioned to seek closure. This is a psychological fact. When you take something away without explaining, the mind creates an obsession. It's called the Zeigarnik effect, the phenomenon that makes you think more about what's left unfinished than what's finished. And silence, when applied well, is the most powerful incomplete cut there is. It transforms the ordinary man into an emotional puzzle. And most importantly, it takes away her control of the game. Now, understand this isn't ghosting. It's not disappearing to manipulate. It's strategically modulating your presence to keep the allure high. A woman needs to feel like she doesn't own you, that she's still discovering you, that you're not conquered territory, but rather a map with missing pieces. Your every absence needs to contain a riddle. A well-placed silence can be worth more than any romantic declaration. Because when you fall silent at the right moment, you trigger her impulse to seek you out. And herein lies one of the greatest contradictions of seduction. The more you explain yourself, the less interesting you become. The man who overly justifies his disappearances, who rushes to fix misunderstandings, who always wants to resolve things, becomes predictable in his attempt to be understood. The man who disappears gracefully, who speaks little but carries emotional depth in every short sentence, becomes unforgettable because he creates space for her to imagine. And where there is imagination, there is projection. Where there is projection, there is desire. Let's look at a practical image. Imagine you exchanged a series of messages with a woman. The conversation flowed. There was laughter, innuendo, sexual tension, and at the moment of greatest involvement, you disappear. Nothing abrupt, nothing offensive. You simply go about your life, focus on your projects, and go 2 days without contact. When you return, you don't justify yourself. You comment something light, a phrase that opens the door but doesn't explain the room. Something like, "I was immersed in something interesting." And you, "Did you survive the silence?" This phrase carries multiple triggers. It shows you weren't idle. It suggests you were focused on something bigger, and it even insinuates that she may have felt your absence. It's an invitation to vulnerability, but with pride. This type of communication is more seductive than 1,000 shallow compliments, because it activates her desire for validation without you having to ask for it. It's at this point that you begin to understand the difference between the emotionally intelligent man and the emotionally needy one. The needy man wants to be noticed. The intelligent man wants to be remembered. And to be remembered, you can't be constantly present. You have to create contrasts, disappear at the peak, leave conversations open-ended, disappear after the climax of a date. This isn't cruelty, it's emotional design. Want to know why she forgets you so easily? Because your presence didn't create enough tension to generate emotional memory. Because you were always there, predictably accessible. And desire requires a subtle but indispensable ingredient: lack. When you're missing, you become fantasy. When it's always present, it becomes routine. And there's no desire where there's no risk. The science of attraction has already proven that dopamine, a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure, is more activated by anticipation than by reward. This means that waiting for the message is more addictive than the message itself. When you regulate your presence, you're creating anticipation. When you regulate your attention, you're creating addiction. And silence used precisely is the most effective stimulant for this. But be careful. Silence only works if you have an aura behind it. You need to build an image of value, depth, and authenticity. Silence from an empty man is ignored. Silence from a man with presence is pursued. It becomes an absence that fills the room, that provokes conversations about you, even when you're not present. It's the, "So, did you notice he's gone?" that starts to circulate in your group of friends. And here comes a necessary philosophical shift. Most men think that to despise is to not respond, to not pay attention. But to despise at its highest level is to become so selective with your energy that it becomes a privilege. To despise isn't to turn away, it's to look calmly and simply not react. It's to smile when she tries to provoke you with jealousy. It's to compliment her gestures, not her body. It's to treat her beauty as something common, but her ideas as something rare. This is the contempt that attracts, the contempt that doesn't humiliate, it elevates you. Do you want to know what type of man generates the most emotional obsession in a woman? It's not the one who disappears for games. It's the one with a life so dense, so well structured, that he simply can't be 100% available. He responds with presence, but without haste. He appears with interest, but without urgency. He shows desire, but not need. This is the man she begins to observe, to want to decipher, to try to please, because he created a kind of fascination in silence that constant presence could never provide. And that's why the most powerful weapon of modern seduction is strategic selectivity, the ability to be there and disappear at the right moment. Silence, when used well, becomes a signature. It becomes charm. It becomes a symbol of emotional control. It says, "I am complete enough not to need your immediate response." And that, to the female brain, is a message that screams louder than any declaration. If you've come this far expecting a trick, I apologize. What you're learning isn't a trick. It's an internal revolution. It's a shift in focus. It's about stopping seeking attention and starting to attract respect. It's about abandoning the idea of acceptance and starting to build an image so solid that she needs to win you over to feel validated. This is the true power of silent contempt. It manifests itself not in shouting, but in absence. Not in cold indifference, but in absence shrouded in mystery. And when done well, it transforms you not into the nice guy she knew, but into the man she'll never forget. And now you might be wondering, how do I leave such a strong mark that my absence speaks louder than the presence of others? The answer lies in the next chapter. Because more important than disappearing is what you leave behind before you disappear. Have you ever disappeared from someone's life and been completely forgotten? This happens to most men. They disappear, hoping to make an impact, but they're erased from memory as if they never existed. And do you know why? Because they left no mark before they left. Silence, when not preceded by an intense emotional experience, doesn't generate longing. It generates relief. You want her to seek you out, but you've only given her reasons to be ignored. Absence only has power when it carries with it the weight of the presence that existed before it. It's like a song that stops at the chorus, a story that ends without a response, a scent that lingers in the air after a hug. This is emotional anchoring, the art of planting signals in her memory before retreating. And here's the key that few understand. The stronger the last impression, the more intense the absence will be. You need to be such a well-constructed presence that even in silence, you continue to be remembered. This requires strategy. You won't disappear just like that. You will disappear at the height of your emotional impact. It's like a magician who ends his act with the most impressive trick and disappears from the stage before anyone can ask a question. The audience applauds, talks about him for days, searches his name on Google. That's what you want, for her to keep looking for you, even when you're no longer there. But how do you leave this powerful impression? Start with micro-anchors, small experiences that go beyond the obvious. Most men try to impress with expensive dinners, predictable compliments, or repetitive messages. None of these make a difference. What makes a difference is what surprises her emotionally. It's the compliment no one else gave. It's the comment about something she said and thought no one noticed. It's the analogy that connects her life to a rare idea. It's the genuine laugh she gave when you showed her a side of the world she hadn't seen before. For example, instead of saying you're beautiful, say you have an elegant way of losing focus when you're passionate about something. That's unique, that's personal, that's memorable, because you're touching on a layer other men don't even notice. And when you withdraw after that, you're not just disappearing, you're creating an emotional void that no one else can fill. Another crucial point: gestures. Great seducers don't impress with expensive gifts. They impress with symbolism, with small gestures that carry history and intention. A book underlined with a comet. A song sent at just the right moment, with the wrong subtitle on purpose. A silence in the middle of a conversation, followed by a phrase. This pause says more than anything I could ever write to you. This isn't forced seduction. This is art. It's emotional composition. And before you disappear, create a contrast, a moment of deep connection, a lingering look, a goodbye that feels final even though it isn't. Absence will hurt more if she doesn't know when or if you'll return. The problem is that men disappear like those who come and go, or worse, they disappear into boredom, into routine, into disconnection. And then the silence becomes relief. You need to disappear when she still wants more, when the conversation is still pulsating, when she finds herself thinking about you hours later. This is emotional calculation. This is narrative mastery. And this is where we enter one of the most dangerous principles of seduction: manipulating the illusion of control. A woman needs to believe she was in control, that she decided to get involved, that she let herself go. But when you disappear, you reveal that you were the one driving the game all along. This deconstructs her emotional narrative and makes her rethink everything. This narrative collapse is what transforms the nice guy into the man who stayed in her mind. You don't want to be a good moment. You want to be a turning point, the one she compares to the next. The one she remembers when someone else tries. The one she brings to mind when she's alone. And to do that, you need to understand that seduction doesn't end with the kiss nor in bed. It ends much later when you become an emotional reference. The philosopher Ortega Gasset wrote the combination of these two elements, fascination and surrender, is essential to the love we are talking about. Fascination comes from mystery. Surrender comes from presence. When you balance the two, you become irresistible. But when you disappear without fascinating, you become absence. When you fascinate and remain available, you become predictable. The magic is in the dosage, in the rhythm, in the dance between intensity and distance. And therein lies the beauty of graceful contempt. It's not a form of punishment, it's a way of marking emotional territory. You don't say, "I don't want you." You say, "Maybe." You don't cut, you pause, you don't ignore, you postpone. And this delay in emotional response is what keeps her trying. The mind hates gaps, and you will become the biggest gap in her life. But be careful. This strategy only works if you're consistent. You need to be man enough to maintain the mystery without collapsing emotionally. You can't disappear and then say, "Hi, I've been missing." You can't keep spying on people's stories, waiting for a reaction. That undermines all the authority you've built. Disappearing with impact requires courage and more. It requires purpose. You're not disappearing for a game. You're disappearing because you have a life, a purpose, a project, a mission, and it shows. She senses you're absent out of greatness, not pride, and that's where respect is born. Because deep down, every woman wants to be with someone she admires. And admiration isn't born from constant presence. It's born from emotional control, from inner strength, from elegant unpredictability. This kind of absence leaves its mark. She'll remember your voice while listening to another man speak. She'll compare your look with the coldness of the next man. She'll expect the next man to have your depth. And she'll be frustrated because you've established a pattern. And nothing is more dangerous than the man who becomes a woman's emotional standard. And that's why, when you know how to exit the scene the right way, you won't chase after her anymore. Because the memory of you will do it for you. Your silence will continue to speak to her. Your scent will linger on the blanket of memory. Your words will continue to echo in spaces others won't fill. You've become more than a man. You've become a symbol. And in the end, true seduction isn't in what you say, it's in what you leave behind. And what you leave behind needs to be strong enough to scream into the void.